Now, this is a good time to bring in Miles. Miles, you've just heard me talk about the Greens releasing their dental policy over the weekend associated with their wealth tax, of course. I'm right, aren't I? I mean, I know I'm sort of talking to the choir at the moment, but the truth is, if the Greens, Labour and Te Pāti Māori get into a position, they've got to bring in a wealth tax, don't they, to bring the Greens into their coalition?
You're spot on, Michael. You're spot on. That's exactly what will happen. And as you said, the Labour Party's got an out because they'll say, oh, well, coalition negotiations, and that was part of the arrangement. So they've given themselves a loophole, if you like.
Yeah, and it's also clearly obvious now from the comments of Grant Robertson over the weekend that they'll be removing GST from fruit and vegetables, isn't it?
Well, yes. I mean, it's quite interesting that Nicola Willis is announcing Labour Party's policy for them. So, yeah, I think they will.
Well, it's just that Grant Robertson over the weekend, he described the policy as a boondoggle, which is a fraudulent action, basically, a year ago. But he's now saying, he said it over the weekend, I think it was on Q&A yesterday, he said something along the lines of, well, we can always work around boondoggles other countries have. Well, end of story. I would have thought that's laid down Mazir from the Minister of Finance point of view. He's clearly going to be removing it.
Yeah, it's electioneering at its best, I guess, or worst, whichever way you want to look at it. But the overseas evidence shows that it doesn't actually do much to the price of the food at all, because costs get tied up in administering the GST system then. So, and the sellers, the supermarkets, etc., are going to have extra costs as well in administering the system, so it's not going to make food much cheaper. What we're saying is, how about giving those people a direct tax cut rather than fiddling around with the GST system?
Yeah, and also, I mean, the stupidity of it is the fresh fruit and vegetables. That means if I go and get vegetables in a can, or fruit in a can, which is just as good for me, or alternatively from the frozen section, I'll still have to pay 15% for that.
Yeah, well, that's what happened in Australia. That's what happened in the UK. It's a real mess, and then it ends up through the court system, different organisations arguing over what constitutes fresh food.
They don't,
and veggie.
But they won't be removing it prior to the election, so it's a promise. If we get elected, we will. Just putting aside for one moment your national hat, if you can, Miles, do you think that still will appeal to a number of people in your electorate who are doing it tough at the moment in terms of the cost of living?
Oh, it would appeal to lots of people, obviously, Michael, because they think that it will make their grocery bill 15% cheaper, but that's not how it works. But that's just the reality of, I guess, people who don't have the information around similar systems overseas and haven't seen it operate overseas. So, yes, it will appeal to them.
Now, you're a national candidate, you're on the road every day, you're getting news releases, you're getting stuff from your research team. I mean, you're au fait. You're probably across a whole series of portfolios at the moment, just quietly, Miles. You've never known as much as you do ever about everything just at the moment. But can I ask this? What's it like on the ground? Are people in Waitaki, which is a huge electorate, as we've talked about before, are they into this election, or is it still in the never for them?
It is now, since most people had their electoral imps, little orange man envelope turn up last week.
Yep.
They are now far more aware than they were earlier on in the year. I mean, earlier on in the year, there would be quite a few doors you'd knock on that people didn't know there was even an election this year. So it's a bit more of a reality for most people now.
Now, you've got a huge electorate, as we know. It's what Wanaka in, hasn't it?
Yes.
And it's got Oamaru, and it's got Cromwell in it. And how far north do you go again?
Geraldine.
Wow, that's on the outskirts of Timaru. It's past Timaru, actually, but not Timaru.
No, not Timaru. It zigzags around Timaru and Pleasant Point and goes up to the Rangitata River and goes right up into basically the spine of the Southern Alps, I suppose.
Right.
And then right down to Makarora and across Wanaka, Cromwell, zigzags around Alex, Ranfurly, then right across to Flag Swamp, which is south of Palmerston.
Right. So the thing that it used to be that Oamaru was a Labour voting area, so it's the urban area on the coast, tended to vote more Labour than National, and it was always that vote was diluted by the sort of rural hinterland. Well, there's been a lot more rural hinterland, so Waitaki was one of the few seats that National held on to at the last election when the red tide swept through New Zealand. Do you detect within, what I'm really interested in is how Heartland Labour and Oamaru are actually feeling about things. Have you detected any change or whiff of change in their particular stance?
Yeah, look, there's been quite a few people I've talked to who have voted Labour their entire lives but won't vote for them this election. A number of them have said they'd vote for National, which surprises me because generally dyed-in-the-wool party supporters wouldn't jump to the opposition, but quite a few have. And there's quite a few that have indicated they're not sure who they're going to vote for, but it won't be Labour.
And on what basis are they making that decision, do you think? I mean, what are the motivating forces for them to say that to you?
Wasteful spending, the fact that the country has racked up a huge amount of debt and we've got nothing to show for it. That's been a big motivator for them, so that ends up obviously with the cost of living and the economy sort of tied in with their responses. Also, the co-governance is another thing that has driven people away from their traditional voter base, I suppose. So they're two of the bigger ones. The fact that the health, and south of the Waitaki in particular, the health system is a very big concern because Dunedin Hospital is the main hospital for a massive area, and the issues that have been happening with Dunedin Hospital have really put a lot of people off voting for Labour because the hospital was supposed to be finished by now and it hasn't even started. So,
Miles, you are going to be a Member of Parliament. You were always going to be a Member of Parliament. Jackie Dean held on to the seat easily at the last election when really everything else was going south, literally, or red. So your election or selection as the national candidate automatically led you to that conclusion. Nevertheless, you'd be sitting at the polls going, am I going to be in government or am I going to be in opposition? What's the reaction of a candidate like you personally? What was your reaction as a candidate like when you saw those two polls last week, the Talbot Mills poll and then the 3 News Read Research poll?
Well, it's hard for me to ascertain, I suppose. It reflects what I'm hearing from the people in this electorate, but this electorate, as you know, is a rural electorate really, and the towns that within it rely on, apart from Wanaka, I suppose, which is tourist oriented, but the towns within it rely on the rural sector for their businesses. So the polls reflected what I've been told by a lot of people. So for me, I think I was just interested in that it obviously has been a turning of the tide, if you like, in the big urban electorates, because they're the ones that win or lose a government its majority.
Yeah,
so,
yeah. I mean, if Waitaki went red, then there'd be something wrong, wouldn't there, really, in lots of ways? You're sitting on a very safe...
Well, I'm very mindful of the fact that at the last election, the Labour Party got far a larger portion of the party vote than National did in this electorate itself. So that's, So, yeah, I guess those polls are, heartening, but doesn't mean the job's over, Michael, and we've just got to keep pushing out the message and getting out and about and talking to people and telling them what our policies are. I guess what I've been pushing too is the fact that, the Greens, New Zealand First and ACT really can promise anything. All those smaller parties can promise anything but don't have to deliver them. Labour promised lots and never delivered it, and National, if they promise stuff through an election campaign, we're the only ones that are held to account, and so we tend to deliver. So I'm certainly pushing that message as much as I can.
I've invited your Labour opposite on the show because, as you know, we're a free speech forum at the end of the day, and he has declined. Have you come across Ethan Rail on the campaign or at public meetings yourself?
Yes. Yep. He's a nice enough guy. I've got no problem with him.
Well, he's a kid. He's 18 years of age. But I'm just what's your apart from being a smart boy, what else? I'm sort of. How do you play it? I mean, basically, he's your son or your grandson, Miles. How do you? And it's difficult to take an 18-year-old seriously as a political candidate. How do you play that? Do you just be nice and treat him like your favourite nephew, or what?
I just treat him like I treat everybody else, I guess, Michael. And when it comes to the meet the candidate debates, etc., I'll just debate him on the issues rather than on who he is. And I think that's the only way to play it, to be honest.
Oh, good on you. You're a bigger man than I am, because I'd be certainly... I'd be saying you've got to be joking. But nevertheless, can I just say, actually, that's a very good thing. Have you, at any time during the campaign up until now, been the subject of any personal attack at all that you're aware of?
Oh yeah, there's a bit of that on the Facebook page and stuff. I don't care much about it. The truth is that social media and that I wasn't exactly immersed in it before the campaign anyway, Michael. And the odd post I'll put up here, I really read the comments. I've got a campaign team does a lot of that stuff for me, but there's been a bit of stuff, but I think that's just social media in itself. That's probably why I've more often than not didn't do much with it prior to becoming a candidate, because I felt it was gave people the anonymity to say things that they wouldn't say to your face.
Oh, yeah, and also, as we both know, they're very politically motivated anyhow. I'm glad you don't take it seriously. Miles, you've got, 80 days away now? Is it 80 days?
It's 70. It might be 69 days, actually.
Oh, for God's sake, is it really? Good grief, it's getting close, isn't it? How's your family holding up? All right?
Yeah, good. They're good. I've had my son home for 4 months. He's been overseas. He's come home for 4 months. He's been running the farm for me, and he's back off overseas for a couple of years to Ireland next week, or this week actually. So,
does that worry you? I mean, that's something that really has come out during this campaign too. I'll talk about more for the wealth tax of the Greens, but geez, a lot of people leaving this country at the moment, Miles, and a lot of young, gifted people, well, frankly, like your son, who we need in this country, productive, well-educated, well-balanced, rounded, entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
Gosh, we're losing a lot of those people at the moment.
Yeah, I agree. If we can get the country back on track, as our campaign slogan is, I'm hoping that those people will be happy enough to come back. I mean, we've always had the young folk head offshore and do their OE. I mean, I did it myself, and I think maybe there's been a bit of a catch-up because the borders were closed for so long that we've had a probably excessive amount go out due to that. But my worry is if we don't win this election and we have a Maori Party, Green Party, Labour Party coalition, then why would you want to come home?
Well, you might ask. Thank you very much for joining us, Miles. Best of luck to you, and we'll catch up with you later on the campaign trail. Have a good day.
No worries. Thanks, Michael.
Okay, mate. Nice to talk to you. That's Miles Anderson, the National Party. Well, he'll definitely be a candidate. He'll be. Yes, I did. Can I just say, we invite everybody on the show, all right? And if they decide not to turn up and take the opportunity to talk, that's fine. But on a couple of occasions now, I've asked Ethan Ryle to come on. He's the Labour Party candidate for Waitaki for the general election. I think he's turned 19 now, to be fair. He was head boy of Waitaki Boys High School last year. And I've just and to ask the obvious questions, but also, introduce himself. And gosh, I can have my views changed about young folks standing if they seem to be somebody that's there. But nope, he's refused the opportunity to do so. And I think that speaks of people when they deny themselves the opportunity to change the perception of others. What do you think?